Hello, and welcome to the On My Mind podcast. I'm your host, Remy Keene, and as always, it's a pleasure to be with you. I am here with one of my good friends, Eric Byrnes. Hi, Eric. How are you?
Hey, Jeremy. Doing good?
Hey, good. It's great to have you on the show today, and I'm excited to get to have a conversation. Why don't you share a little bit about you with the audience just so they can get to know you in case they don't?
Yeah, sure. Like you said, my name is Eric Byrnes. I am a good friend of Remy Keene. We've been friends for a long time. We had a business together for a little bit. Um, we've done all kinds of stuff. I'm a Christian. We go to the same church. Career-wise, I've worked in aerospace for probably 15 years or so, from customer service to program management, supply chain, all that kind of stuff. And then currently, I'm pursuing a career in real estate.
Awesome. That's um, great to hear that you're a leader, obviously, because that's something I know about you. But one thing that always has stood out to me is the like leadership that you just take in a situation, whether it be at church or whether it be in your roles and at work. When it comes to leadership, how do you show compassion, even when being a leader? Some people have the horrible boss mindset when someone's just constantly like a horrible boss to them. How do you make an effort to not be that, if you do?
Yeah, I think everybody's had that, that instance, that boss, that situation, however long that season was of having a crappy boss.
Right.
And for me personally, I think it comes down to the relationships that you have. I think it is the relationships with your boss, the relationships with your peers, and the relationships with your direct reports. Um, I've had a boss before or bosses before where the only form of communication they had was, "Hey, I'm going to stop by your office when I need something." And that's the only time, you see them. Or
Mm.
something's wrong, or there's an emergency and they need something done right away and they know you'll do it. So I've had those instances. I've also had bosses where if you know the bell curve of employees, you have your A employees, your star players, and you have your C employees, your sucky players, and then Bs. I've had bosses that overload the A's, the workhorses.
Mm.
They know they'll get the job done. They'll just dump on them the work that a C player should be doing, but since they're failing, they just dump them on this. So I've had bosses that don't have the relationship with people. I've had bosses that don't delegate, um, I guess, fairly in proportion to work. Um, and so I use that, I guess, in my personal leadership of I want to make an effort to get to know somebody, to understand, are they married? Do they have kids? What do they like to do? What drives them? What's their personality? And I think in by default, getting to know somebody and developing a relationship, you then begin to understand what's going to incentivize, like your employees, if you're talking about it from a leadership perspective or a management perspective, um, understanding who your employees are, what drives them, what interests them, what they're passionate about, what they hate. You can really use that to uh, make sure that that employee's in the right spot, or do they need to maybe go somewhere else, even outside of your department, if it's best for the company and best for that person. I've found that, I don't necessarily want to use somebody to get me to a higher level. Um, my job as a leader is to help the people that work for me discover their strengths, and I want to help them reach their potential. And then in turn, it just by default elevates you. But some people start out, and I know I did when I was younger, not caring about people. And it's funny because I think you and I had this conversation maybe like a year and a half ago where you were like, Eric, I remember when you used to work at this specific job, and we would be talking, and it was like you didn't even know, like you weren't even paying attention to anything like I was saying. You were just waiting for your chance to talk, you know? And so I think about that too, where it was like, man, that's true, you know? That happened. And so I take those things, and I wanted to build a relationship with my team members outside of just every time I stop by their desk, I'm looking for something. Um, and then also evaluating the total workload for the department or for the group, and then understanding how to split that out, also based on strengths and weaknesses, but in a fair way that somebody doesn't feel like they're just overburdened and someone's like, I'm living the good life, I don't do anything because I just pretend to suck at it and they won't give me anything. So I guess that's kind of where what I would say.
Yeah, so like what I picked up on was mainly empathy and basically fairness and kindness are your focuses. So like empathy and the fact that you get to know who the person is, what drives them, so you could put yourself into their shoes and be like, well, what would motivate me to work harder for me? And
Yeah.
basically you find the answer in, well, you want to provide for your family, or and also it helps you manage like tough situations. Like say you have to have a hard conversation with someone, instead of being like condemning, you can actually show them love instead by showing them that you care about them. Hey, I know you're going through this in your life, or like, hey man, I noticed your performance has kind of dropped. Has something happened that you're concerned about? Or you can approach them in a different way than a boss that's hard, but instead of a person that cares. Like, I feel
Yeah.
like in leadership, what we want to see more of, what I would want to see more of, is a boss that actually cares about me and doesn't treat me like, why aren't you performing, you better do it or else. uh, how about, why aren't you performing, are you okay?
Yeah.
It's like, when was the last time that you were in a uncomfortable situation, that, or conversation with someone, and how did you navigate that in your mind?
It's funny because when you say empathy, when I think about a tough situation, I would say, um, some tough situations, especially, the higher up in management you get, the more people uh, almost feel you kind of have access to a lot more people. And so with peers that could be very dominant and different from the approach that I would have. But in answering your question, I would say, if you have a peer that comes into your office, say, and is just so upset about something, and and they just start taking it out on you, um, I would say, I'd suggest, first of all, don't get defensive, just in general. Like, they could be right, they could be wrong, whatever. They're blowing up about something, and there's something driving that. It's not just it, you hit the nail on the head when you said empathy, because you got to look at it from their perspective. Okay, again, I have a relationship with this person. I know what they're normally like, because I've, gone and spent time with them. We've gone out to dinner or lunches or whatever. So I know what they're supposed to be like. Now they're like this. Okay, let me put myself in their shoes, or did something happen today? Did something go wrong? And I feel like you can have a lot more compassion when you empathize with somebody. Um, and you're not just shutting them off and saying, your emotions, your feelings mean nothing to me. This is a job, and we do X, Y, Z, no matter what. This is the mindset you're supposed to have, blah, blah, blah. You can take a step back and say, look, I get it. You're upset, you're mad about something. Let's break this down. And a lot of times, especially as a leader, you want to kind of guide them back on the right course so that when they leave their office, they're in a better state than when they came in. You
Right.
don't want to, tag on and rile them up and get them even more mad or angry about something or situation. So I think it's important to take a step back and almost dissect the situation with them, and 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 lead them in a way where they actually tell you what the problem is,
Mhm.
and you're not the one that's, hey, are you mad about blah blah blah? Are you mad about this? And it's like, well, no, but now I am. And so I think that leading them in that way to help them find those answers in a compassionate way gets them out of that situation. And I think that's a victory of if someone's that upset and comes in and is just yelling, where they have to shut the door because they're about to just unload. Um, I think that's a victory to be able to have the compassion to step back, don't be defensive, and empathize with this person.
Right. Try to see it from their perspective, try to see where they're coming from. And honestly, you can use that same plan in your daily life to interact with everyone, but it's awesome that you can also carry that over into your professional life. And basically look at why the person, what's their motivations, because most every person is motivated by something and to do something. Like, I don't think most people want, to hurt your feelings or to be mean to you, but for some reason something is causing that. And I work in customer service in my full-time job, and that's one thing I notice all the time. The customer's almost never mad at me personally. They're
Yeah,
mad at the event that happened, and maybe not even the company, but they're mad at the thing that happened. And if we can solve that, we can keep the customer happy, and maybe not the customer. And honestly, whenever you're a manager, your customers are actually your employees, because they're looking to you to lead them and to provide the work environment for them. And so
yeah.
that's your product to them. um what sort of like pre meeting prep do you do? Like, if like, it, say you aren't even aware it's going to be a rough conversation, say you're just coming into review, do you do anything to prep just to make sure that you're mindful of that? Or do you remind yourself of anything, or maybe daily? Do you just remind yourself of anything, to lead yourself in that right path? Because it takes practice. It doesn't just, come naturally all the time. It takes some effort. So what do you do that shows that effort?
I think that the days that I don't spend any time with God before work are more challenging than others for sure. I think it's important to get your mind right. I think it's important to, not in a prideful way, but look at your position and say, I'm responsible for these people. You know, I may not be responsible for what exactly they do, but I am responsible for giving the best that I can in the work environment and how I treat them and how I coach or mentor them. And so I think it's spending time for me personally. I think it's spending time with God and getting my mind right and honestly just thinking about, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Absolutely. And knowing their value, right? Knowing that they're valuable in the same way that you're valuable, and you gotta hunt the good things, that even if they might seem like a bad worker, there's probably something that could motivate them to become a
Yeah.
good worker.
I mean, because they're not a tool in your arsenal, right? A
Yeah.
computer is a tool in your arsenal. A
Right.
program in a computer is a tool, a spreadsheet, but these are people, and you don't just go to them and be like, boop, 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 here's your task for the day, get it done. It's like, you kind of have to understand, and I've had some employees that were difficult, um, where you kind of had to finesse your way around getting what you wanted out of them. And it wasn't because they didn't care. Um, they just that was their personality. And so what I did was uh, I tried to cater, I guess you would say, to that type of personality,
Sure.
and figure out, okay, well, what can I do with the least amount of resistance? For the most effort on my part and the least effort on their part to get what I'm saying, what do I do? And then it's setting goals for yourself as a leader to say, okay, what's the next step where, I don't want to have to go over there and, I don't know, just as a hypothetical, bring this person a donut if I want them to do something for me. So what's my next step to be like, okay, I'm not going to bring them a donut to get them to do this. What it comes back to relationships.
Right.
What incentivizes that person? And for a lot of people, a lot of employees, it is not money.
Hmm.
I mean, there's an amount of money that you have to make. But for
Sure.
most employees, money is not the true motivator. When you really get down to it, it's not money. So what is that? What is the incentivizer for this person? Do they not like where they work, their environment? I mean, I had two ladies that worked for me, could not get along with each other for whatever,
Mhm.
constantly had things going on. It's like they would come to my office and then just be like, individually, not together. And it'd be like, okay, well, we're done with this. I'm moving you over here and I'm moving you over here. Immediately fixed the problem, completely resolved it. It helped the relationship with the rest of the team that was in the room. It completely took care of everything. And so you kind of have to think outside of the box when you're looking at things like that, where it's like these people are valuable, like you said, you know, but something is causing them not to perform at their best. And what
Right.
is that? What's causing them to fight with these other people or to talk about somebody or whatever? Figure that out. And it takes effort, and
Mhm.
that's what's hard. And I think that makes a difference between a good manager and a sucky manager.
Sure. I really like that you were in that position, because I just imagine the same issue occurring with someone who wasn't able to understand that it was a people problem, and not like a getting work done problem. Like if you can identify that, certain people work together and they need to be together, then that, and certain people can't work together, that's okay. I mean, certain people are going to clash. Certain people are going to have differences of opinion and personality, that just go against each other. So it's best to figure out the strengths that you want to use and the strengths of that person to then promote them somewhere else,
It,
instead of
yeah.
demoting them. Go
Well,
ahead.
and the other thing I would say too is, um, you have some employees that are vocal. They'll come to your office and they'll say, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. But then you have other employees, they won't say a thing. They
Yeah.
just kind of go with the flow, but they hate it.
Right.
And in that specific instance, there was a guy that came to my office after that happened, maybe a couple weeks later, and was like, it's so much calmer back there. Like I just feel there's not as much tension. I feel better. It's like, hey, you're helping them in their work environment, and that's part of what you're supposed to be doing. You're not there just to, you know, beat them with a stick.
Right. Not fall in line, but how can I help you? It's more
Yeah.
like you're there to serve and impact them. One of the cool things that I had uh happen to me, and maybe you can share about it too, is one of my leaders, they actually like were showing me how to lead, because eventually I want to be, a leader in my regular job. And what they showed me was mostly your employees can do their own coaching. Mostly they know how to fix and correct what they need to, and you just need to walk them through it and help them think
Yeah.
it out. So like asking like leading questions to them, okay, well, what do you think you could do better on this call? Something like that, instead of, well, this is what you did wrong. Well, they probably know that. And and I see so many similarities in just like Christianity and like the failures that I make. It's like, I know my failures, I know that's wrong, I know I need to fix that, but instead of focusing on it, I focus on the good that God gives to me, and it motivates me to want to do good because I've gotten such a good gift. But anyway, what do you use any tactics like that in your own management style that more leads a person to come to their own realization?
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, um, there's a book called Strength-Based Leadership, and it focuses on, you don't try necessarily to focus on building up the weakness of a person to make them all around better. You focus on their strength. That's what they're already good at. They're gonna continue to be good at that. You focus on that, you hone that in, you look for opportunities where you can use that strength on your team and put it where it needs to be put, you know? But absolutely, like, leading somebody, and that's part of it too, is understanding their personality, understanding their strengths, understanding what incentivizes them, or what de-incentivizes them. Because some people, it's like, you think you're doing something great for them, and you're like,
Mhm.
everybody loves this, and this person's like, I could care less about your stupid little whatever. Or
Yeah.
somebody could be like, oh my gosh, I could win a pin if I get the most sales or something.
Yeah.
It's like, you kind of have to understand what drives each individual employee, because it's not cookie cutter. You can't
Right.
go into a position of management and say, well, all of the customer service reps, this is the stamp of what you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to speak and what you're supposed to feel. It just doesn't work like that. And that's okay. Everyone's
Yeah.
different. You cater to their strengths. But talking about, leading them, absolutely. Um, you know, uh, I had business operations, which is customer service, program management, contracts, that type of thing. And so a lot of it was, well, I'll just tell you this, if you don't know, which I'm sure you do, customers don't generally just call in to tell you how much they love you.
Yep.
They call because they're pissed about something.
Right. They're
And
they're
so,
mad and they want to share that with you.
absolutely. And so, a lot of times, uh, coaching opportunities, if you will, or opportunities where you can start with these leading questions and move them into where they're going to go, those conversations start from a place where my employee is already upset, or they've escalated to a point because the customer has angered them so much where they've come into my office and be like, I just need to vent about blah, 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 blah. And so then you do take those opportunities to be like, okay, does this person always get upset about something? Does this always trigger them when this happens? And then think about, okay, what are some things that I could suggest to them to think about, of what they could do different? Because, you think about it like your brain's a computer. The questions you ask your brain will answer those questions.
Mhm.
Now, if they're right or wrong, whatever, your brain
Sure.
is just going to answer those questions. So you don't ask questions of, why did you do that? Well, yeah, like you said, they already know why. They know that. But okay, you did this. What would have been a better response? And then you try to make them feel like they're helping the customer. What do you think the customer was feeling
Mhm.
in that moment when they did that to you? And how could you maybe help the customer to not be so crazy to go off on you and de-escalate that situation quicker? So absolutely, leading questions are great. I think that doing that is a lot more powerful to an individual because they have come up with the answers on their own, and it'll be more impactful for them personally.
Absolutely. All right. Well, kind of changing topic here and everything. What is one like key leadership idea that you feel every leader should have that maybe not a lot of them do? And it can be anything from the simplest thing that maybe you see a lot of people not really practicing, or something that you saw someone else practice that even you would want to get better at. Because one of the best things is we're all works in progress, and if we aren't striving to get better, we're missing something if we think we've achieved it, because you can always improve. So what's one area that you would like to see other leaders be able to take and improve on, something that you might see is lacking?
Sure. Man, I would think two things. I would think the first one will be relationships, not just treating your employees like a tool, that you go in and, okay, it's time to use the hammer and hit that nail in, but actually understanding who they are, what they want to do, Because I think a lot of times leaders will fall into this. If you think about a scenario where maybe you're a low-level manager and you want a senior level manager position or a director position, um, you might have the skills, you might have the experience and all of the qualifications. Then your boss comes to you and says, okay, let's see. If we put you in this position, who would take your spot? If you haven't invested in your employees and groomed them to take over for you, your boss is going to be stupid if he moves you in there without a backfill,
Right.
or your
Yep.
position wasn't valuable to begin with in the first place. So I would
Mm.
say relationships. And then I would say second, what I have seen a lot of, and this is in a couple different corporations, is communication. I think managers are afraid sometimes to communicate pertinent information that the employees need to know. I think that if you don't communicate to your employees about something, they will start to draw their own conclusions. And a lot of times, those conclusions they draw up in their mind are worse than the situation even is. So, for instance, you hear rumors of layoffs, and if you don't say anything and you don't even address it, and you leave your employees to their own devices, they're like, oh crap, they're coming. The
Yeah.
layoffs are coming. It's probably tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then they're starting to think about that. They're not focused on work. They're not doing, their job. That's just one example, but communication eh, wouldn't where you would want to be told something if something was going on. I
Yeah.
get there are many instances where there is data or there is sensitive information that cannot be flowed down, and and that sucks sometimes when it's
Mm.
coming and you can't tell somebody that it's coming. But where you can, and as much as possible, I would say communication is great.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was actually in a situation recently at work that they waited till it's six weeks before the change happens, and they told us, and it's a huge change. So yeah, it was like we were blindsided. We saw nothing coming.
Yeah.
And like, why was this decision made? Why did we invest all this time in this project if we're not going to be able to benefit from it? And then we found out we're all being, sent back to where we came from because we're just like, oh, we decided that you'd be better for the company over there. I'm like,
Wow.
they always tell us, and it's one of the things I love, is that they tell us to balance CEO, customer, employee, owner. If your decision impacts the customers, the employees, and the owners, and it's all positive impact, good. But if it like really outweighs in one area and like someone is taking a hit, we maybe need to look at it and see what we could do differently in the situation and what the plan could be. So ultimately, yeah, if they would have communicated that a lot sooner to us and more gently handled it, I think it would have been a lot less of like a surprise, here's a freight train that's going to hit you,
Yep.
instead of a just a conversation like, well, if it's better for the company, I'm okay with it. But when
Yeah.
we're 6 weeks out from the big event, it's like, what? I
Yeah.
have to adjust my life to all this now, and I'm just finding out about it. It's yeah, no, I agree. Communication is huge, and
And I've been in two situations like that where I'll say I've done it both ways. That's a better way to
sure,
put it. Where I've been the one that didn't give notice. And all of a sudden I go to the team and I'm like, hey, tomorrow we're gonna make some changes around here. And uh it did not go over well.
yeah,
It took a lot of after the fact effort to regain trust of
hmm,
employees that hey, I really did think this through. It wasn't me just, hey, let's try this out tomorrow. but in the way it was presented, that's how they interpreted it.
Sure.
And it was just like, oh, you got this idea and you want to just start it? Great.
Yeah.
And I've seen it done by other managers where they'll come in and they're like, I worked at this other company. It was great. Everything was perfect this specific way. That's what we're going to do here. And it's like, dude, this is your first week here. Get established, have some time, understand the processes, what works, what doesn't work, understand the team,
Yeah.
what's going to work for the team and what's not going to work for the team. Because you have a great idea, but if you don't have the team currently in place, the answer is not to fire everybody and hire in, your old staff. I feel
Right.
like you're a failure as a manager if you cannot work with the team you have and build up that team to success. And so I've done it that way where I didn't tell anybody and it was just like, hey, here's an idea. We're going to do this.
Mhm.
And then I've done it where, hey, let's come together. This idea needs to happen. And this is kind of what I'm thinking. And if I approach it that way, what I've found is you get a lot more buy-in from employees. You
Mhm.
get brainstorming sessions where people are like, well, I've been here for 20 years. We actually tried that and it sucked. And then it leads you to ask the questions, okay, what were the pitfalls?
Yeah.
What was wrong? Where did you guys miss a step? Could we do something different now to avoid those? And so it helps to understand that, and that's within your own team. Then when you start getting up into higher level management, you need to think about other teams because you could go in and make a complete change to the process of your team and what they're doing, but there could be a team upstream or downstream that are affected by what your team does. And if you change something that impacts them and you don't tell them, that manager and their team will be upset.
Yeah.
It's called nested modular
Mhm.
is the viewpoint of looking at what your process is, the process before and the process after, and understanding how they work together. And then you can make big level changes like that without just causing chaos in the company. And so I think it's huge to start the communication early, especially in a big change that's coming through. Um, I think that's important. And sometimes they still don't like it,
Sure.
but you're going to do it. But at
Yeah.
least you've given them an opportunity to speak their mind, to say their piece about it. You can say, look, I hear you. I know you are not on board with this. Let's try it. And you have to be a manager that is going to say, I'm okay with change, because you
Mhm.
can say, let's try it. If it doesn't work after so many weeks, we'll go back to the old way. But at least we
Mhm.
could say we tried. And most of the time, people are like, that's fair. We'll try
Yeah.
it and see. And a lot of times it works. Or you find, for the most part, it works, but there's a few tweaks that we need to do. And then you work on the tweaks and you just keep going. So
And the
communication,
cool
relationships.
exactly. I feel like the cool thing that it led back to relationships again. If you know your team, you're going to be able to lead them and course correct, even if it is an idea that needs to be worked out. You're going to be able to course correct back to the right thing if you know your team. If you don't, then you're kind of led down the wrong path. So
Yep.
yeah, that's great.
Because
That's
you could have a team that completely lays down on you.
right.
I had I had a specific team, and then I was promoted to a different area, and I had to leave that team and go over here. Another manager came in and completely had these ideas that would derail it,
Mm,
and that person is no longer there, and so they left. They just weren't a good fit for the company. That group came back under me, and we were having a candid conversation, and I was like, I was hearing these rumors that he was wanting you to do this and do this and do this, and they're like, yeah, we didn't do any of that. So you could have a team that completely lays down on you if you're not listening
right.
and you're not caring about the relationship.
Totally. So, what tips would you share, if you have any, to make sure your relationships with everyone around you is like is what it needs to be, and if not, like what are some steps you can take to get it there?
Sure. I think with anything, it's consistency. Um, and I think it's habit forming. So I think if you can begin the habit of doing simple things, um, and I would say if you're a manager and you have direct reports, I would say one-on-ones with your employees are killer.
Mhm.
Weekly one-on-ones, we would do every Friday, and I would just have a block of time where I would meet back to back to back to back to back to back with all my employees. Um, I would have I would take notes, honestly, because I don't remember things sometimes, just off the top of my head. And so uh, I would have a person in a page and I would take notes, not with them. I would actively talk with them and engage with them in conversation. But after the fact, jot down some things that I remembered, or hey, make sure to ask them this next week to see if this resolved with their son, or did the doctor visit go well for your daughter? Things like that. And then I would institute another habit of a daily walk around, where in the morning, and I would do this first thing, walk around, you greet your employees, and you don't ask them for anything. It's a
Mhm.
time to just say good morning, to talk about whatever. You don't even necessarily have to ask them about anything. You can just tell them what's going on. I would not do that every day, but um, it's really a time to engage so that they have a relationship with you that's not just about work, where you're
Mhm.
not just coming over to ask them, oh crap, here comes the boss and it's in the morning time. Uh, did I have a project I was supposed to have done today? Like,
Right.
oh, here comes Eric. He's just coming to say hi.
Yeah.
Um, and so I would say uh, start some habits like that. Very small, very simple. Daily, walk around, talk to your employees, and then weekly one-on-ones. Um, and I think it's important too to talk about goals and performance. Um, some managers are afraid to talk about performance, but it, I had a boss that was really good about this. He would write down notes, and in instances where something made him be like, "Oh, that was really good. I really liked what you did there," or there was some improvement that could be made there. And then uh, we would do it quarterly, where we would sit down and he would go through those things, and then we would actually have goals. I think a lot of times managers don't put forth goals.
Mhm.
Now with you, I think being in a call center, it's very easy to put forth goals. They're very
Sure.
tangible. They're
Yeah.
very quantitative.
Mhm.
Um, it's X, it's Y, it's Z. Uh, for me, in a position with program managers where the metric that we had was on time delivery, or that type of a thing, where if you have a job where there isn't a cut and dry thing, it's not you have to enter so many pieces of paper into the system or make so many things. You kind of have to get creative with how you do that. It's kind of going off the point here, but anyways, whatever the goals are, whatever the performance is based off of, I think it's important to share the strengths, the weaknesses that you see, which I wouldn't call weaknesses. I would just say areas of improvement.
Right.
And then use those examples to say, this is what I've seen. This is why I'm telling you what I'm telling you. Because sometimes employees get reviews and the review is so high level. You're like, oh, not great at this. And you're like, well, what do you mean? Like, tell me why I'm not great at that.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
this one boss, that was something he taught me was, okay, you could maybe have that high level, but then you have specific examples that tail into it, and you say, okay, this is why, you know,
Mhm.
this specific instance, this is what you maybe could have done differently that I see from the outside looking in. Maybe you chose to do the best thing you could, but anyways, that's kind of one thing that he did with me that kind of I was like, wow, that's really cool. Like, you're taking the time to really write down these things and care. So I think it's important to develop those habits and put it on the calendar. Don't just be like, yeah, we'll get together, because things will happen and come up. So put it on a
Mhm.
calendar, block out time specific for your employees. If your employees are important to you, then you will make time for them.
Right.
And they see that. Employees will see through people that are just blowing smoke up their butt or are genuine. I mean, if you're genuine, your employees will see that.
So I have to share this with you because you described exactly what an experience from one team that I was on to another. When I transitioned, the it threw me off because the new manager, he's the one who cared. I realize now, but at the time I was like, why does he walk around and say hi every morning? What does he want from me? Because previously it was like that's the only reason I got talked to by the manager, which
Sure.
is my coach's boss. So it's like not even my direct boss, but my boss's boss. So it's like, why is he talking to me? What's going on? But he's actually one of my favorite people in the company now because he proved to me that he cares about me. He cared about my position in the company. He cares about me advancing because he said exactly like you said, if there's no one to take my place when I move up, then I can't move up. So he's like, I need you to take his place so he can take mine, and so we can all get better at our jobs. And if you want that, that's great. He also has people on the team that is like, I don't want to move up. And he's like, that's totally
Yeah,
cool. Let's find
sure.
some other ways to motivate you. So I love that. I love that you've recognized that in your own field, and that, I mean, it translates to every other field too.
Well, and I think that's important too. You said, you weren't even his direct report, right? And
Mhm.
so I would do the same thing. I would walk the shop. I mean, and just talk to people, um, and just say, "Hey, how you doing? What's going on over here? What are you building? What's this?" And um, when it really counts, and when there's something urgent that needs to be done, or you need to call somebody in that has already gone home for the night, that conversation goes a lot better with somebody that you've shown that you care about them,
Right.
rather than someone that probably would look at the phone and be like, ignore. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's important. And you were asking advice for managers. I would say don't ever think that you're too good to talk to somebody. You don't ever get to a point where you are too good to go down to that person's level or that employee and say hello to them. You never attain that. It never happens.
I would even venture to say that even outside of your own department or things like that, because you never know who can move over, who can eventually be your boss or your employee, like your report. Because that's one of the other things is until I realized it, that if you don't get your face out there when you interview, like say you want to do an interview to promote yourself, well, if they don't recognize your face, they're gonna be like, who's that? But I also recognize that with people like, oh, I'm excited to go to his team. So if I'm a top performer and I'm excited to go to that team, that promotes you in a way. And how do I know that he's cool? Well, one, word of mouth, and two, I see how you interact with people. And
Mhm.
yeah, I feel like you had something to say.
It's funny that you said that
Uh-huh.
because it made me think about um, I had a boss where I was actually really upset about this. I had been with the company for a few years and I didn't get a promotion. They brought
Mhm.
somebody from the outside in. Um, I really got along with him well, and we still talk to this day. And one of the things he was telling me was, be aware that the people you work with, you could work for them, they could work for you, you could be moved all around, whatever. The funny thing is that he was my boss, and then and then eventually he was one of the managers that worked for me when I became a senior manager. He was a manager that worked for me, and we had such a great relationship. He was one of my best managers that worked for me. And the same with peers. You cannot treat your peers with such disdain, because what if you become their boss? They are going to
Right.
remember every interaction they had with you. You know,
Hmm.
I don't know how many positive interactions it takes to erase a negative. I think I heard one time it was like 100 or something.
Yeah.
It was some ridiculous number. It was a very bad ratio. It's like you will have to work your butt off if you treat people badly, you know, to to try and gain them again. And so it's just funny that, you know, you could be working with a peer and then all of a sudden they could be your direct report and they could lay down on you and not work for you at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that ultimately it always goes back to relationship, empathy, knowing the person and caring about that person. It will pour over onto you and your experience and your like the good things that come to you will be because you did good things for other people. I really feel like that's the case. So
I think
uh
that's true because a lot of times in business, it is not what you know, it's who you know.
yeah.
And if you have the reputation that you are a do anything to get to the top of the ladder, um, well, yeah, your
Yeah.
team is not going to perform for you. If you
Yeah.
have the reputation that you care about your team, um, I mean, if your company allows it, because a lot
Sure.
of corporations don't, but
Hmm.
when before we were all corporatized, there was a company I worked with that was more private, and we would, I would bring in breakfast for them. We would go out for lunch. We would go golfing. Um, I would take time to get away from the office and work on our relationships
Yeah.
without telling them, hey, we're going to go work on our relationships. You know, it was just like, hey, let's go golfing.
Yeah.
Hey, let's go out to lunch. Let's go buy some lamps today. Like just silly things. I mean,
Yeah.
and sometimes those little things that might not mean a lot to you, they will remember that, you know, and then
Hmm.
come back and be like, you know, I remember when we did blah blah blah. And it's like, those are good times, huh?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
And then,
It's
like you said too, with other people in the company, if you move around to different places or different departments, because I did, if you already have the relationship with other people, it is so much easier to come into a department and they are already workhorses for you. I
hmm.
did that, and coming into the supply chain world, um, you know, from the business operations into supply chain, I already knew everybody. I already worked with people out there. I'd already actually went out there and learned some of their stuff.
Yeah.
And it was night and day, I mean, of what it could have been. I mean, if if you don't have the relationships with people, it can make or break you.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this conversation because I mean it just shows you how important people are in our daily life, and that we shouldn't take any person for granted, and basically recognize their value and figure out how you can navigate your life recognizing that constantly, and we can always get better at it. So it's good to just talk it out and think it out, and talk about that. So if there was one thing you could leave with that you wanted to comment on, that's super important, that you just wanted to get out to people that we haven't discussed so far, what would you want to reinforce to anyone?
I would say that as a Christian, we are to glorify God and we are to spread the kingdom. And I think that in showing empathy, in showing love, that accomplishes that by actions, a lot of times a lot more than words. You can, you know, it's, I will say one thing that is challenging as a manager is with HR in a corporate setting, it can be very difficult to be a witness, to
Mhm.
talk to somebody about Jesus. Um, if your human resources is very strict, but I think that showing them who you are, and even having people uh, notice it so much that on your off days they came up to you and was like, what's going on? Normally you're so happy and bright, and how it makes me sick. How do you do that? Like, how are you that way? It's like,
Yeah.
well, it's Jesus, you know, that's what it is. And I think developing those relationships with love, with empathizing with other people and having compassion, I think that really opens the door um, to show the love of Christ.
I agree. Yeah, that's awesome. That's a good note to end on. I really think that if we just think about that more, and try to apply it to our lives, then we'll benefit, and everyone will. So, all right, I definitely want to thank you for being on the podcast
Yeah,
and joining me in conversation today. It was great. I really think it was fruitful, and I'm glad to um, be with you. So we'll
yeah,
uh, go to future Jeremy now. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the On My Mind podcast. I really enjoyed having the conversation with Eric, and I hope you were able to gain some things to apply to your own life, whether it's in business or in just your regular life. A lot of these tips can be applied in both areas. So, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel, because I come out with conversations like this each month, and I would love to have you in the next conversation. In addition to that, make sure that you click one of these two videos on your screen right now to check out another conversation that I've had, or a conversation with you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful and blessed day.